Of course, I want to thank John, who was a big influence in my life, both at the AI lab and outside of the lab. Unlike Whit, who actually weaseled away into his house for a while, I was a guest in his house, but I was the maintenance man. Whenever he needed some work done on his heating system, I was a volunteer to come over and give him some heat, get it working again, among other things. But I came to the AI lab in, I guess, 1965. At first, they were down on campus. I didn't really have much contact the first year. As I was working in the mechanical engineering department, I was a mechanical engineer, graduate student. My undergraduate had been at MIT in aeronautics and astronautics. And the ME department was engaged to build arms for the robot, or arms for the computer, or robots for the computer. And the first task I was assigned was to work on a project which we called ORM, O-R-M, which is the Norwegian word for snake. And the philosophy was that you've got a digital computer, shouldn't you be able to have a digital arm, or maybe a binary computer and a binary arm? And essentially we were trying to build an arm which had digital actuators and digital segments to it. And essentially it was a stack of plates with binary actuators. The actuator could be extended or not extended, 0 or 1. And by properly encoding all these actuators, you could theoretically move the arm to any position, any of a set number of positions. I essentially, with several other people, we were working under Bernie Roth, who's here today, another grad student, Larry Leifer, who's a professor in the ME department still, and some of the other grad students. Don Piper was involved, and Mike Kahn, a few other people early on in the ME department who worked on at the AI lab. Unfortunately, we found out that trajectory control was a difficult thing. And that's, of course, we were trying to make the equivalent, I would say, of a gray code arm. In other words, switching the states, the arm would do very funny things in moving from one state to the next state. It wasn't a matter of making a small motion. Sometimes a one-bit motion might be a very large motion, or to make a small motion, you'd have to, of course, shift a lot of bits at one time. And of course, mechanical devices don't switch instantly. They're not clocked, if you want to call it that. They take some time, and so we had some problems. The next arm that we tried to build was,
Vic,
yeah.
would you agree that the arm was a bad idea?
No, I don't know, but
I would claim that the arm is one of my worst ideas.
okay, all right. I didn't say that. Ask John.
Control it between positions. It went.
Right. Okay. Anyhow, okay, the hydraulic arm. The next great idea was, well, we've got a big computer and it's fast. Well, of course, fast in those days. Why not have a fast arm? Computers can always be faster than robots, than robot arms. So a fast arm for a fast computer. So we built this hydraulic arm, again, with Bernie Roth and Don Piper and several other people. It was a group effort, although I was, I guess, the one who sort of shepherded through to actually helping get it functional. I mean, it had a big hydraulic power supply, 2,000 psi, hydraulic fluid. It was a powerful arm. It took 6 degrees of freedom. It had a servo gripper on the end.
It was
And well, we had to put it in a cage. That's right, right. And in fact, we got it built, and then it starts. Every time it ran, it shook the building because although the AI lab was on a spine, a concrete spine, the building itself was made out of wood, lots of wood, and not only did it shake the building every time it ran, it dripped oil. It leaked. And the leaks were in the room, but if you walked into the room, you got oil on your feet, and then on your shoes, and you walked out of the room, and the floor got sticky all over the place. You could see footprints, and people would get stuck. It was a mess. But it was a fast arm, and we learned a lot of things from it. We learned a lot of things. For one thing, we learned that the only way to control the arm was in what's called space war mode. And of course, we have a person who's going to talk about space war in the next talk, maybe. But space war mode meant that nobody else could use the computer when the robot arm was running. And so, of course, it got relegated to running at 2 to 3 in the morning and became the night shift device. And you'd have to sign up for 5 minutes at a time or 10 minutes at a time. So we found that, and there were some issues with trajectory control. Again, even with this arm, it required this constant attention from the computer. With that knowledge, I was assigned to design an arm that was much more compatible with the computer. And essentially, we learned about how to kinematically configure the arm so that the arm solution, the computations were simplified and could be done much faster. And also how to have a robot that could work with a time-sharing system. Essentially, it could move and then just hold position without having to turn off the computer while it calculated the next move, make another move, and then lock into a position without the computer. And that became the Stanford arm. And I built several versions of those. There's one of them is the original one. The gold arm is upstairs in this building on display. Another project that I got involved in was Hans Moravec's cart. The cart was a device that was built not originally by me. It was built by a professor now retired, Jim Adams, as his PhD thesis in the mechanical engineering department, as a device to sort of determine the issues related to the time delay in communications between here and the moon. Driving a vehicle on the moon. You have this delay of a couple seconds, and how does that affect control and driving around the moon? That was done prior to the AI lab being in existence. This was a device that was sitting around left over. It's sort of like a relic. And I resurrected that, and using some input from Hans, we were able to make it into change the steering configuration, change the way that television cameras were mounted and controlled and stuff, things of that sort, and build the Stanford cart, which became that was the robot vehicle that ran around on the driveway around the building. And I don't know where it is now. Is it at the Computer History Museum? Yeah, right. It's the Computer History Museum. I've seen it there. And I might say the hydraulic arm is there too, but it's in a barrel. Yeah, I saw it there a few years ago in a barrel in the storeroom. Nobody knew what it was, but it's in there.
So is the arm.
And the arm is there. Yeah, the arm is there. The arm is there. Right. And Stanford arm's up here. Okay. And some of the outgrowths of this work was that I had a force sensor on the Stanford arm. A number of years later, JPL and NASA asked me to design a larger version of the force sensor for the space shuttle robot arm, and it's actually flown on the space shuttle. It's a force sensor that's about that big and about that thick. Ours was a little thing this big. And that was a very nice project. It's been used. Tony Batesy was the fellow at JPL involved, and Ken Salisbury mentioned that. He worked with Tony as well. I worked with him. I've been involved in a number of other companies, and in all cases, it seems like Stanford people have been, AI lab people have been involved. Imogen was a company that I was an investor, a founding investor in it. I actually feel that Les maybe doesn't remember, but he was about to go to SRI, and I said, nope, don't do that. You'll just end up sitting and fighting bureaucracy the rest of your life. Do Imogen. And so he and then Luis Pardo, who's in the back here today, were the two key people at Imogen. And I played a small role, but did some mechanical engineering even for them, interfacing Andy Bechtolsheim's Sunboard to the LBP 10, was it, printer, and in the controller box that we had sold. That was before Sun started. It was the Sun project at Stanford. So there were a lot of connections there. I was involved in starting a company called, well, I had my own company, Vicarm, or Vicarm, with Bruce Shimano, who was in the Hand-Eye group, and a number of other people. And we sold Stanford arms, and I designed an arm for MIT, for Marvin Minsky at MIT, called the MIT arm, and both of those arms were an early product of that company. And that became part of Unimation, and then eventually Westinghouse Corporation, and now Stoible Corporation, a European organization. I founded Automatics Incorporated, another company in 1980 with Don Piper, who's here today, and a number of others who weren't at the AI lab, but Don was, and I were the couple of the founders of that company. And I wanted to sort of say a microbot with John Hill at SRI. I was one of the original investors in that, gave him the money to sort of start that. I have a little silver medal from the DARPA Grand Challenge, not from the Stanford entry, but from Team Overbot, which Bruce Baumgart and John Nagel, who are both here today, have been involved in. What?
Sorry.
What?
I'm glad Stanford won.
Stanford won. We got as far as the silver medal round, right? We got a little silver medal.
We got a nice,
Yeah.
nice participation medal for the final.
That's right. That's right. That little DARPA. Yeah, right. It's substantial, but not as substantial as the money is not there. Wasn't there? Although it was funded by what's his name? John Walker at Autodesk funded our project. Okay. And I wanted to thank some other people. I had lots of little mechanical engineering projects. Many of you have told me of projects that I don't even recall that I was involved in. Like Dave Poole, I traded technical programming and electronics knowledge for sailboat work. I designed his roller furling jib system for his own custom-built sailboat. Unfortunately, that's now at the bottom of the ocean, and it was lost in the boat when he was lost. As I think most of you know, Dave was lost at sea in his sailboat. I was an investor in the Black Hole Fund, Richard Wayrock, and I want to tell you, Les, I think I lost $10,000 in that, not $5,000.
You bought 2 shares.
No, well, you must have gotten a cheap deal because he says it was it was 10,000. You got in cheap. Anyhow, and I lost all the money to my knowledge. I don't think I got anything back. Is that? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I lost 5,000. Okay. All right. And of course, I mean, there's other people who I worked on all sorts of projects. Bill Pitts. Russ Taylor, sailboat projects and all sorts of things.
Got my car.
Oh, I owned his car. That's right. I salvaged his Simca.
Yeah.
The Simca, right. At last, I was one for all these crazy cars, right? And I want to thank Ted Panofsky, who built electronics for me when I had my company, and Tom Gafford, who designed interfaces, who are all here today. And told me what a 74-259 did and how it became my favorite little TTL logic block, because that's all I knew in those days. And Bob Tucker, and And I might say that I want to also thank Ted in particular because he sawed up his Libroscope disc. It makes my dining table just a little more valuable now as a collector's item because there's one less of them there. My dining table is the Libroscope disc with a glass top on it, so it's nice and pristine still. Okay.
Thank you.